we are very close to the top, as you gather, of the Messines Ridge, and the Germans had the high ground all the way from close by at Plug Street up to the bottom of what they call the Ypres salient, and the salient is like a bulge. The problem is with a bulge, the Germans could shell from all sides of the bulge into the middle, but the British still held on to Ypres from 1914 right through to the end of the war. It was almost to say we were not giving it up, a bit like Verdun for the French, you know, we were not giving that up. And they decided to take the ridge, did the British, in a very planned and concerted campaign and battle, which is the start of the Third Battle of Ypres on the 7th of June 1917. Now, those who've been on the Somme who know about the Somme, the British were slaughtered on the first day of the Somme when they came out of the trenches thinking it would be so easy after a concerted 28 days of shelling. The only trouble was the Germans on the Somme sat in their bunkers knowing full well what was going on, suffered the shell shock and waited when the shelling stopped. Of course they came out with the machine guns and slaughtered the British up to 20,000 on that morning on the Somme. Now there's this comment about donkey generals that people say, and I won't, that's a debate in itself, but obviously lessons were learnt from the Somme, and instead of shelling for 28 days, to take the Messines Ridge, which is why we took it, while the Commonwealth troops, mainly New Zealanders, took it in less than an hour, was down to a General Plumer. And General Plumer looked the archetypal donkey general like Colonel Blimp. White hair, big white moustache, but that was very deceiving. He was one of the few that was clever enough. He was so clever that actually he was Haig's tutor at Sandhurst, and he marked Haig down, saying not a very talented officer. And Haig remembered this, and he actually, when Plumer planned the Messines Ridge battle and took it, Haig transferred him to the Italian campaign. Yeah? And that's why they took so long to get up to Passchendaele, because Haig stopped. If he'd have carried on, they'd have taken it in dry weather, and they wouldn't have taken a month to go 7 miles, as you'll see when we end at Passchendaele this afternoon. But back to the Messines Ridge battle, in the morning, what they did was do what they call a creeping barrage. And if you turn round, you can actually see that is where the British came up from, is Mont Kemmel. But if you turn round in these trees, which wouldn't have been here on the 7th of June 1917, you recall you've seen Messines Church, right? Well, that's the height, isn't it? Churches are always on the top, don't they? And that was the observation point. But what happened was the British artillery back there, behind the lines, could worked it out, and Plumer said you go behind the creeping barrage. And what does that mean is that if I'm in the artillery here, the barrage hitting the Germans is about 100 yards in front of you, and every minute they heighten the guns by a click so that you were creeping behind it, so it was going 100 yards up, 100 yards up, and the troops were taking it behind. And that's how, quote, easy it was. But it was also helped by a number of mines being exploded under the Germans in shock and awe tactics. And you think the Americans did it in Iraq and all that, forget it. Plumer invented shock and awe, right? And what he did psychologically was set the mines off, all 19, not in one go. He set them off at intervals all the way down, and all you could see is these trees from White Sheet and Hill 60 to the left, which is about 8-9 miles away, was one mine going off, one after another, boom, 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 all the way down to the bottom where we've come from at Plug Street. Only trouble is there's 3 more to go off yet, and the last one went off in 1955 and blew a big hole in Plug Street. Anyway, I'm mindful of time, so I hope that gives you some indication of why I brought you here and Messines, and it was an important lesson learnt for the Commonwealth troops down to General Plumer. And General Plumer, Lord Plumer of Messines, as he took his title quite rightly, opened up the Menin Gate in 1927, and he said of the men on the Menin Gate, they are not missing, they are here. And one final thing, if you'll see here, it says from the uttermost ends of the earth. that obviously refers to the New Zealand, and that is also on the memorial on Gallipoli, where so many of the New Zealanders, the Anzacs, the Australians and the New Zealanders, really cut their teeth in battle on Gallipoli in April 1915. Then they came here and kept coming. So thank you very much for listening. Give you some indication of, you look at the bunkers, which are German bunkers, but they were taken because of the creeping barrage. The only trouble is, when they took it, of course the Germans learnt the lesson in 1918 and did the same thing back to us, except they then ran out of supplies. It was their last throw of the dice in 1918, a bit like the Battle of the Bulge in 1944, and we were able to roll them all the way back to where we came from this morning to Coing and beyond on Armistice Day, because they ran out of steam, they extended their logistics, they just couldn't supply. And actually the British beat the Germans not by killing German troops, but by killing the horses. Because you ain't got a horse, you can't bring up the supplies. So they learnt a lot of lessons. So I hope that's given you a quick overview. Thank you for listening. Quick look at the bunkers, back to look at the Irish Peace Park, and I think we're ready for a cup of coffee, aren't we?